SoCal Connected is made possible through the generous support of the Amundsen Foundation, serving the Los Angeles community since 1952. On tonight's SoCal Connected, they're called maybe babies.
This is how you pick your car. It's not how we're growing our family.
1 million frozen embryos left over after fertility treatment.
There's this social disaster looming, which is that couples who created embryos will die and have embryos in storage.
Deciding their future places couples in an ethical minefield.
I don't think I'd want to destroy them. And at the same time, I don't know if I feel comfortable right now in my life donating them.
Just enjoy how good the waves were, and then we'd come back and get it all done.
It's a great place to work, and nature lovers swear by its products. But this company is selling something more.
I think we do need to be as relentless as the NRA in protecting public lands and wilderness because there's very little left.
Good evening, I'm Val Zavala. They call them maybe babies, nearly 1 million frozen embryos stored in labs across the country, and many of them will not be used by the couples who created them. So what will happen to these embryos? Welcome to the newest controversy surrounding the creation of human life.
Parents' Day at Biola University, and John and Marlene Strege have come to visit their freshman year daughter. It's a classic family picture. The girl has her mother's smile and her father's writing talent. But she's not biologically related to either of her parents. The Streges created a family through adoption's new frontier, and this is where it all began. Meet Snowflake number 1.
I didn't really start the ripple effect. I'm just the product of the ripple.
Hannah, as she's actually called, was born of an embryo frozen 2 decades ago from another family's in vitro fertilization treatment, or IVF.
We were the first family to use this model of adopting embryos. It's been a total positive experience.
It's a story they've had to explain many times over the years. Marlene had heard that IVF couples often have leftover frozen embryos in storage after they were done having children. Her fertility doctor even told her he'd give her some from another family. But this is where Marlene's ethical radar went on high alert.
I've got embryos, just pick one, and he handed me a list. And I looked at him and I go, this is how you pick your car based on options. I go, this is not how we're growing our family. We would have to eventually explain this someday to a child.
The Streges approached Nightlight Christian Adoption Center in Santa Ana and developed a plan to openly adopt an embryo. They wanted another couple to choose them and go through a home study. They wanted any children born to them to know their biological family.
We just wanted a baby, and God had bigger plans for us, and so that's sort of, we just went along as it unfolded.
I was so elated to be pregnant and to actually say those words, I'm pregnant, But then I realized that I was actually saving a life at the same time, that it wasn't just about me. It was really about my daughter, and that she was being able to fulfill her gift of life.
Their determination gave birth to the Snowflake Embryo Adoption Program, now in dozens of adoption centers across the country.
Our program is mainly attracting is women who are able to carry but not conceive.
Daniel Nurbus runs all the adoption programs at Nightlight, a pro-life agency where handprints of adopted American and international children link with those adopted as embryos, like Hannah. While the number of so-called snowflake children has grown to about 1,500 in the U.S., it's still rare. Less than 10% of couples with remaining frozen embryos put them up for adoption. It's one of few options for people with leftover embryos, including donating to science or to another couple anonymously, or simply discarding them.
I think the idea of embryo adoption sounds like science fiction to people when we present it, and it's not just the general public, but even people who are pursuing fertility treatment haven't heard of embryo adoption. So there still needs to be awareness about the issue.
But it goes a lot deeper than awareness. Dealing with embryos opens up an ethical minefield. And for many who now have leftover embryos, created with so much personal investment, the idea of watching their potential biological children raised by strangers is hard to grasp. That's because embryo adoptions are encouraged to be open.
Are they going to be comfortable with receiving photos, having a visit once a year face-to-face, having each other's phone numbers, having each other's email address, seeing that child on Facebook? Both families will have to have the same level of comfort in order for this to work.
The fertility industry is expected to grow to $14 billion a year by 2020, with each round of IVF costing at least $10,000. And oftentimes, more than one round is needed to get pregnant. Successful pregnancy still requires as many chances at bat as possible.
So all the procedures are done here in this one clinic?
Yes, this is where we make the embryos inside the laboratory.
Dr. Mark Kahn is a partner fertility doctor at CCRM, Orange County.
Inside the laboratory, we take the sperm and the eggs and we mix them together, and then we create the embryos. And later, if we need to freeze the embryos, we do that here in the laboratory as well. This is the embryology storage tank room. So each one of these tanks have hundreds of embryos actually frozen inside the tanks. The embryos can stay frozen indefinitely. Typically, we send a note out to the patients every year to remind them that they have their frozen embryos and to ask what they want to do with them at that point in time.
That's the question couples struggle to confront in the aftermath of successful IVF treatments. What to do with an abundance of maybe babies.
There's this social disaster looming, which is that couples who created embryos will die and have embryos in storage, leaving their children with this decision of what to do about those embryos.
There are an estimated 1 million frozen embryos in storage, including those earmarked for research and having more children later. But a growing number are left in storage year after year as couples put off making a decision.
Not knowing what to do with the embryo can cause anxiety for many couples. But at the same time, I think leaving the doors open that what science allowed patients to do, which is preserve their fertility for the future, that allows people to have options. So we've got two sacs that look absolutely beautiful.
Dr. Shaheen Gadir helped Jen Chung and Peter Descarolis get pregnant with twin boys using Peter's sperm and donor eggs.
Congratulations!
The best thing in the world.
Getting to know you.
They have their hands full now, but the extra embryo in storage is taking up space in its own way.
Now that they're here, knowing that they have essentially a sibling that's just sitting there, I battle with it if I want to try to transfer it or not, because, you know, I don't know, just seems kind of natural.
Like other IVF couples, they go back and forth on when human life begins and the purpose of an embryo created but no longer needed.
I think that definitely going through this process has made me sort of rethink a lot of that. You know, like where does life, when does it begin? And I don't know, yeah, it's made it a lot more sort of unclear, I think.
The wheels on the bus go round and round.
And giving their embryo to another couple, that doesn't sit well either.
I kind of wanted to give back to somebody else that maybe was going through the same thing, but now that they're here, my feeling has changed a little bit because it's their sibling, and it would kind of be interesting. I don't know how I would feel about knowing that there's another baby out there with somebody else that's their, you know, well, part of him and their sibling. So
the only right answer is the right answer for each couple and family.
Psychologist Dr. Francine Lederer has led support groups and counseled a growing number of couples in the throes of that decision.
going through fertility treatments in and of itself is a very, again, exhausting and tiresome and frustrating and difficult process. So if the couple's conceived a child, I think that at the end of the day, they're busy already raising that child. It's really hard to start thinking about and putting oneself again into an emotional space of then having to figure out, oh, what do we need to do?
The discussion can go very deep, and I encourage everyone not to make a decision that they're not 100% sure about, because there's no going back.
Do you have discussions with them about what an embryo actually is? Because that plays into how they actually relate to the embryo and how they think about it.
So that's a really good question, and because no one can truly say exactly what an embryo is, it's an opinion in many eyes. So some people think it's a life, some people think it's cells, some people think it's a sperm and egg that have joined. I don't think you can say that, well, this is exactly what an embryo is. So giving my own opinion on what I think an embryo is may not be the correct answer for some people.
Heavy emotions can linger for everyone in an embryo adoption as well. Hannah is now navigating the complex terrain of slowly building a relationship with her biological family.
I want to be best friends with them, but we didn't grow up together, and we didn't have relationships that siblings had. We don't have that banter or the fights or the laughing and the closeness, and we just didn't have that. But I know I do want a relationship with them no matter what it is. I'm working on it.
It's complicated,
It's
right?
complicated, like any family is.
The topic of what to do with frozen embryos is definitely not being talked about enough. It's not really acknowledged as an emotional struggle. It's almost like it's become kind of like a business system of some kind.
And a political football. In 2005, the Streges and other snowflake families stood behind President George W. Bush as he vetoed a bill allowing federal funding for research using human embryos. 4 years later, it was scientists who were standing behind President Barack Obama when he announced expansion of funding for embryo stem cell research.
Our government has forced what I believe is a false choice between sound science and moral values. In this case, I believe the two are not inconsistent. As a person of faith, I believe we are called to care for each other and work to ease human suffering.
The National Institutes of Health has a clear position on using frozen embryos to find cures for Parkinson's, damaged spinal cords, and for the reproductive research that produced those embryos in the first place. The Trump administration has so far been quiet on the issue. We contacted 4 universities to discuss research on embryos. In a sign of how politically charged the topic is, they all declined to talk to us, including a USC Keck fertility doctor who drew swift backlash for a recent op-ed piece. He criticized the Department of Health and Human Services' call to protect life starting at conception. So while scientists hope to discover the potential life-saving mysteries of embryos, Marlene and other snowflake families hope each embryo has a chance at an individual life.
So we went to Congress to really put a face, Hannah and it was actually Hannah and the snowflakes 2 and 3, twin boys, and they can be adopted. There is a purpose for them.
But with 1 million or more embryos sitting in frozen storage, getting them all adopted is not very likely. So for now, the fate of many frozen embryos ends where it began with these IVF couples, in profound dilemma. Like his patients, Dr. Gadir and his wife also have remaining embryos.
I probably would let them stay there for as long as I am here, because I don't think I'd want to destroy them. And at the same time, I don't know if I feel comfortable right now in my life donating them. So since I'm not 100% sure of my decision right now, I think they're going to stay there until I make that decision.
It's a psychological leap to make for any option.
That's a huge one. Either in any option you're going, it's a big decision.
It's one of the best companies in America to work for. Patagonia, the outdoor clothing and equipment company based in Ventura. Patagonia has discovered that pampering employees is profitable, and being good to the environment is good for their bottom line. And after seeing this, you'll probably want to submit your resume.
It's a typical Thursday morning, the sun shining on a kind of workplace paradise on the California coast.
It's just a real sense of community and family, I think, that is being built here, and it's pretty magical.
Employees at Patagonia, the outdoor apparel manufacturer, start the day in a much mellower way than most of us. They bring their kids to an on-site school and daycare. They share rides to work. They have breakfast together in the company's cafeteria, eating off non-disposable plates, and hold meetings under the trees. Patagonia has always considered itself a different kind of business, lavishing benefits on its staff while fiercely defending the environment, even to the point of confronting the Trump administration. All of that is why it's such an attractive place for its workers.
Lilac, come here.
Employees like Tessa Byers, a communications manager, are not only allowed, they are encouraged to take time for themselves and their families. That includes keeping bikes and surfboards handy to head out for a ride anytime during work.
We have a daily surf report that's written up on the board, and especially when the surf's good, people head out and enjoy the waves.
Flip-flops are perfectly acceptable office wear around the campus. Social media producer Jared Muscat even has meetings at the beach. Having meetings out in the ocean, you guys would all go out surfing together and just while you're waiting for a wave, like talk strategy?
Probably talk the strategy of life, not really work, just enjoy how good the waves were, and then we'd come back and get it all done.
If you're wondering whether allowing staff to go surfing instead of selling fleece vests cuts into the company's bottom line, CEO Rose Marcario says the answer at first surprised her too.
I think it affects the bottom line in a positive way. I think we have a much more engaged workforce.
Marcario has been with the company since 2008. She believes the work-life balance that Patagonia has promoted from the beginning is key to its success in the outdoor industry.
Balancing profit and philanthropy and policies that were friendly to and caring toward families and employees, balancing all that and doing it in an authentic way. I think that combination, that it works so well, that we've had such a successful business doing it, I think it's a great model.
The model was created by Patagonia's founder, Yvon Chouinard, back in 1973. He started the company as Chouinard Equipment in this shed, still a centerpiece on the company's campus. Everything is built around it, physically and philosophically.
They were running a small business and they were working with their friends, and they believed that business and work and play and family and friendship was all part of the same soup. And so, yeah, the policies kind of came out of that.
It's a mighty appealing soup, including a list of benefits that would make any working parent drool. Only 13% of U.S. companies have any kind of paid family benefits. At Patagonia, there's fully paid leave for new moms and dads, including ones who adopt kids. And the kicker?
We support traveling parents with children if they're a breastfeeding or bottle feeding parent up to the age of 1, and then however long a parent is breastfeeding if they need to take their child on a trip.
And when you say you support, in other words, a teacher will go with a mom and her baby and take care of the baby, or while mom or dad is in meetings.
Yes.
And the company pays for all the travel, puts that teacher up in a hotel.
Exactly.
Patagonia has a company daycare center and elementary school that goes up to 3rd grade, both here in Ventura and in its Reno, Nevada distribution center.
I know that she's loving it and thriving, and it allows me to go be at work and really focus on a job that I love and am very passionate about.
What I think is an interesting outcome of this whole program is that we have gender parity at all levels of the company. So at the boardroom, at the vice president level, and all through the company. And I think part of the reason that we have that gender parity is that we've provided on-site childcare for 34 years.
But Patagonia doesn't always live up to its stated ideals. In recent years, internal audits have found evidence of significant labor and human rights abuses in some of their overseas suppliers. Marcario doesn't deny it.
Anyone who has a complex supply chain knows that it's a continuous process of monitoring and audits, and things can change, and and it will create situations where you have to go in and rectify problems, and that's part of running a supply chain, and there's a lot of complexity to it. So I don't think the journey's ever over on supply chain management.
The business side hasn't always gone smoothly either. Patagonia has come to the brink of bankruptcy twice, most recently in the early 1990s when it laid off nearly 20% of its workforce. Coming out of that near-death experience, founder Yvonne Chenard refocused the company, doubling down on their commitment to the outdoors. Patagonia launched an environmental audit of their operations and stepped up their activism.
So we give 1% of our sales to grassroots environmental activism. And that really comes directly from our founder's commitment to protecting wilderness, because these were the places that he played in. He climbed and fished and did all manner of outdoor sport in.
The conservation fight has now ramped up significantly. Patagonia and others in the outdoor industry are suing the Trump administration for rescinding millions of acres of protected lands. Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante monuments are suddenly losing ground after an unprecedented review.
You know, to review 27 national monuments that have already been designated by 3 presidents, we'd never seen anything like it. So we got pretty vocal about it, as did our industry. You know, 350 CEOs in our industry came together and put out a public letter about our objection to it.
Since it was designated by President Obama in December 2016, Bears Ears has been the center of a tug-of-war pitting developers and their allies in the Utah state legislature against conservationists and native tribes who revere it as sacred land. That tug-of-war is moving to the courtroom as plans move forward to drastically reduce Bears Ears Monument.
We're going to take every step that we can take as a part of our history of conservation and protection of wilderness to fight this battle.
I also saw you quoted saying we need to be as relentless as the NRA.
Well, I think we do need to be as relentless as the NRA in protecting public lands and wilderness, because there's very little left. I mean, 90% of it already has oil and gas leases on it and can be used for those things. I mean, only 10% is really truly protected for recreation. So I think we should be protecting that with our whole hearts.
The battle over Bears Ears has brought Patagonia and its founder Chenard out in front with an op-ed in the LA Times, and for the first time in its 45-year history, a TV commercial.
I've been a successful businessman because of the lessons I learned in the outdoors.
Not for the company, for saving public lands.
Our Secretary of the Interior, Zinke, has said he believes in public lands. Let's hold him to it. Let's not let him back down on that.
David Lazarus of the LA Times says the company's stance on environmental issues helps it with customers.
It's essentially saying, yeah, we can be capitalists, yeah, we can be business people, yes, we can make a profit, but we don't need to be a bunch of schmucks in the process.
Earlier in 2017, the entire outdoor industry protested the Utah legislature's support for gutting Bears Ears protections. They pulled their trade show out of Salt Lake City after decades there, costing the city $45 million. But does the outdoor industry have the ability to affect federal land use policy in the same way that, say, the oil and gas industry does?
In a word, no, not at all. And what's sad is you brought up the example of the oil industry. These are guys who have tried to lay claim to environmental awareness as one of their core values, and anybody who looks closely at their businesses obviously knows that that's not exactly a reflection of reality, whereas the outdoor gear industry, they are about these things. They are actually sincere when they talk about these sorts of issues, but it is a niche issue. It is a niche industry.
It remains to be seen if Patagonia's suit over Bears Ears succeeds, or if the industry can lead the charge to protect public lands. Marcario sees Patagonia continuing to climb a mountain seemingly unscalable to most corporations, being a company known not just for its profits, but for its values.
You can run a successful business, you can run a profitable business, and you can still do the right thing by our planet and by the people that work for you. I think these are things that are really important right now to protect and to have a voice around. And as a corporation, I think we're using everything we have.
And that's our program for tonight. Don't forget you can see all of our stories on our website at SoCalConnected.org. I'm Val Zavala. We'll see you next time.